Deputy calling the annual meeting of the School District of Monroe to order.
Yep. All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Rich Deputy. I'm the School District of Monroe Board President. Welcome to the School District of Monroe's annual meeting and budget hearing. Thank you for spending some of your evening with us. And some of you may be familiar with the distinction that tonight's meeting is a public meeting of the district electors. That's everybody in this room that lives within the district. So tonight, this body of electors is entrusted with the powers defined in a Wisconsin statute. It's 120.10. It empowers this body with certain responsibilities. District electors should exercise these special powers with contemplation and care, and the actions that this body takes tonight can have an impact on the operations of the school district and the welfare of the community that it serves. So for many of you, this may be your first annual meeting or even your first meeting governed by parliamentary procedure. So I'm going to go over a few rules of the road for people that are unfamiliar with a meeting of this type. Only qualified electors of the School District of Monroe, Wisconsin may participate in the annual meeting, and a qualified elector is defined by state statute in part as a U.S. citizen age 18 or older who has resided in the School District of Monroe for at least 28 consecutive days before the meeting and has not been convicted of a felony. As you signed in this evening, your provided address, if your provided address is within the School District of Monroe, Wisconsin, you are provided with an orange or a pink colored card. You'll use that card and you'll raise it to cast your votes this evening. This will help our tellers and me discern between residents and non-residents when we are tallying votes. And you may only vote if you're an actual resident of the school district and if you are qualified according to Wisconsin state laws to vote at this meeting. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Doug Whitty, second from the end on my right, your left. He's our legal counsel for the board, and he will be acting as our parliamentarian for the evening. He'll advise the chair on the proper parliamentary procedures defined by Robert's Rules of Order to ensure that the meeting is conducted per policy and within the special powers granted to the electors by state statute. And I've appreciated the civil discourse and respect for one another at previous meetings. For the annual meeting to be conducted, individuals must be afforded the opportunity to be heard during debate and questions. And I'd ask that we continue the established level of civility Monroe has demonstrated as a community and not interrupt individuals while they're speaking or respond to their comments and questions with applause or jeering. Many here tonight may be speaking from a place of strong emotions, and we want to hear and support everyone choosing to participate this evening with our attention. Also, when you rise to speak, please come forward to the microphone over here at the end of the stage so that everybody can hear you. Address the chair to be recognized and begin with your full name and address slowly so that Cindy, over there, so that Cindy can capture the details for our minutes. And because of the size of the crowd, we'd ask that if you rise for debate, that you limit yourself to 2 minutes per person, per topic, and so that all those wishing to speak may do so. No person may speak a second time on a topic until all others wishing to speak have spoken, and no person may speak more than twice on a topic. We also ask that you keep your debate and questions relevant to the topic being discussed. So at this time, we're going to move on to our second item, and I'm going to open the floor for nominations of a chair.
I'd like to make a motion for Rich Deputy to serve as chair for the meeting.
Seconded.
Who is the second? Say your name.
David Kavanaugh.
David Kavanaugh.
Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other nominations?
I make a motion that we close the nominations from the floor. My name is Nicholas Baker, resident of Monroe.
Thank you. I've got a motion and a second to close nominations, so we need to act on that motion. All those in favor of closing the nominations signify by raising your orange card or pink card. Thank you. All those opposed, raise your card. Nominations are closed. So without objection, by unanimous consent, I will be the chair for the rest of the meeting. Without objection, then. Okay. The next item will be to approve our agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve our agenda for this evening. What was your last name, Brian?
Keith.
Keith. Brian Keith. Thank you, Brian. Got a motion by Brian Keith and a second by Terry Montgomery. All those in favor signify by raising your card. All those opposed? Motion carries. And we're now on to the reading of the minutes from October 12th, 2020, annual meeting by School Board Clerk Nikki Matley. If somebody would like to make a motion to waive that reading, I'd entertain it. Who makes the motion? Moved by Bob Erb. I'm sorry, say again? Robert Beck. All those in favor of waiving the reading of the annual minutes signify by raising a card. All those opposed? Motion carries. On to item 5, our introduction from the district administrator.
All right, again, thank you to everybody for attending tonight. Obviously, quite a strong turnout for the annual meeting. One of the primary functions of the annual meeting is to approve the local tax levy associated with the school district of Monroe, and I am going to be introducing a couple of people who will be associated with that presentation. First, I'd like to introduce again Ron Olson, our district business administrator, who's going to be presenting the budget. And also, I want to introduce, as was previously stated, Doug Whitty, who will be serving as legal counsel to the board during this proceeding. And I think the rest of the people on the stage are typically at these at different kinds of district meetings. So I'm not going to introduce everybody, but again, going to take a couple minutes to walk through the budget. So, Ron?
Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. We're going to go through basically pages 5 through 7 of the booklet. There's a lot more pages of budget there. Pages 8 through 47 have additional information. If any of you have questions or would like clarifications on those pages, you can always reach out to me, and I can go over that information with you in more detail. The one page that is back there is on page 34, which is Fund 49. There's a typo, those 21s should say 49. And then on page 41, I'll talk a little bit about. That's the enrollment for the year. Last year we had, as COVID started, a lot of students who chose not to come to 4K. And so this year you'll see that our enrollment of 2284 is up about 41 students from where we were last year. And that's really a reflection of some of those 4K kids coming back into kindergarten, and then our regular 4K numbers being a little closer to where they have normally been the last couple, 3 years. This is, many of you haven't heard me say this because this is a little better audience than I usually get for this. But one thing that is kind of weird for the state of Wisconsin is we're in October. Our fiscal year starts July 1 for school districts. We're here having an annual meeting because our information is a little closer to normal, but even by the time we have to put it into the paper in September so that it's out for the community in advance of this meeting, there's information that we don't get until October 15th. So on October 15th, the state will be releasing to us our final information as to what our state aid is. That'll also provide us the final numbers with our revenue limit so that we know what our levy is. And so even though we're going to be adopting a recommended levy tonight, there's always a process that once we get those final numbers in, the board always has to then, a couple of weeks later, at the end of October, actually adopt the final levy and final budget that we work off of for the school year. So it seems strange that we're 3 months in and we still don't have that information, but because in Wisconsin, because our revenue is so tied into what our third Friday in September count is, there takes some time for the state to not only get everybody's last year's fiscal numbers in to determine what our aid is, but also to see what those enrollments are so that we can set our levies. Looking at page 5, I'll start at the top where we look at our fund balance. You can see we actually have a projected change in the ending fund balance this year of $591,000. For about the last 3 to 4 years, we've been able to run a projected deficit budget of anywhere from $600,000 to $800,000, because during the course of the year, we typically bring our expenditures in a couple percent under. And so when you have a $30 million Fund 10 budget, if you can bring it in a couple percent under, you're going to be saving about $600,000 during the course of the year. And you can see the last couple of years, our fund balance has grown a little bit from 7.9 million to 8 million. As long as we have about at least $7 million, we can avoid short-term cash flow borrowing. I know when I first came to this district, we were actually $500,000 in the hole. You're not supposed to be in the hole, but we were. And we used to have to short-term cash flow borrow and spend about $400,000 a year in interest. And so by having a sufficient fund balance, we've been able to not do that for a number of years now. As we look at the revenues, you can see we're looking at a $500,000 decrease from our last year's actual revenues. We're going from 31.1 million down to 30,600,000. Some of the causes of that in the 200 line, which is local sources, the big cause of that is a reduction in the tax levy for Fund 10, which we'll talk about the tax levy in a little more detail in a second. In the 300s, you'll see an increase in revenues of 160,000. That's an increase for open enrollment revenues in. Now, we can't get too excited because we're going to have an increase for our open enrollment expenditures out because of the incremental increase in costs that the state has each year for those programs. Under the 600s, which is our state revenues, we see about a $200,000 reduction, $215,000 reduction there. Much of that is driven by the reduction in our state aid. Even though for this year the state legislature did not increase the revenue limit, which means we don't get additional dollars to operate the district, they did, for the most part, increase the state aid formula so that most districts were able then to have basically a tax relief, because they couldn't use it for the revenue limit, but there was additional aid. That meant there would be tax relief. Monroe is one of the few districts in the state of Wisconsin where the formula is not projecting us to have an increase. We're actually projected to have a decrease. And so we'll see what the final number comes out on October 15th. We're usually pretty close to what the estimate is, but we're actually projecting a decrease in our state aid for this coming year, which with the reducement in revenue limit means that we're going to have a reduction in the levy as well. Federal sources, 700. Those are all the federal grants programs that we have. Last year, we had a lot of revenues for Medicaid that were multi-prior year revenues that came in. They made adjustments and gave us additional dollars, which is great. But we can't count on that this year, so of that 185,000 shortfall compared to last year's actual, about 100,000 of that is a reduction in what we're anticipating to get in Medicaid, and the other 80,000 is just a reduction in some of the Title I, Title II, and various specialty federal grants that are out there. On the expenditure side, you can actually see we're looking at a 0.73% increase. In the 100,000s, you can see about a 3% increase, and much of that is just driven by some of the normal increase in costs over time. And obviously some costs are going up, and we still have some COVID federal grant related expenditures that fall into the 100,000 function. In the 200,000, you actually see a slight reduction, and that's going to be a reduction based upon, again, some of those COVID-related expenditures for PPE and cleaning supplies and all those things we did when we were ramping up for COVID initially aren't going to be quite as great this year. And we also did a lot of our technology purchases in last year's budget that were needed to be able to educate students on a one-to-one basis. And so we won't have those expenditures again this year. You also see a 100,000 reduction in non-program aid, and that's because of the amount. What that is the cost of the transfer from Fund 10 to Fund 27 for what the district share of special education costs are. And so you see a $100,000 reduction there. We reduced a couple of positions, people who retired in the district that we didn't fill in the special education areas, and so that led to some savings in that budget line item. Just what you don't have in the sheet, but just for some perspective for folks, it'll also kind of apply when we get to the levy. Our Fund 10 revenues and expenditures have basically been flat since 2010. It's not been much growth for us because any small increases that have been allowed by the state of Wisconsin in the revenue limit have been offset for us by our decline in enrollment. to be honest, looking at some of the numbers here, in 2010, we actually had $100,000 more revenues than we're projecting for this coming year. So it's 11 years later, and we actually are having less revenue than we did 11 years ago. In the expenditure side of the equation, again, recall that we usually bring this budget in under. If you go back to 2011, we were about $600,000 less in expenditures than we're projecting in this year's budget. But if we bring in our budget under like we normally do, our ending expenditures will probably be about the same as they were 11 years ago. And so we haven't made any huge cuts. We've made some cuts of attrition as people retire. We've been fortunate to be able to negotiate a freeze in our health insurance for a number of years that has helped us. And so we've been able to mitigate the fact that we're really not seeing any additional revenues. And without the additional revenues, we can't have additional expenditures. And that's been able to help keep us going on as we are. I'm going to jump to page 6, which is the tax levy information. Right at the top, one thing I'll point out is the estimated increase in valuation for the district at the time we set this was 4%. Our advisors were saying it could be 6 to 7% or more. That number gets finalized too. It's right now, the latest update I saw is like it's going to be 6.2%. So what that means is when I talk about what the levy rate is in here, it may get impacted by whatever the final aid is and whatever our final levy is. But if it is what it would be saying in here, when we get that new property valuation, it would mean that we would have an even lower levy rate than what we're showing. If you look kind of at the middle of the page on page 6, you can see that the total levy is a 2.43% reduction from last year, $12,374,000 down to $12,074,000. Property values, if we look at that having a 4% increase, we actually see a 6.18% reduction in what our local levy rate is. And so it will go down to $9.18. And to give you some perspective on that, page 7 is kind of where we look at the history of everything. And if you look at the history of the levy, you can see at the bottom, again, that $12,374,000 going to $12,074,000 this year, again, that 2.43% reduction. But if you look at just the levy amount on the left side of the page, going back to 2007-8, that property levy amount, this is dollars now, this isn't mill rate, this isn't levy rate, this is actual dollars of what our levy is, has always been 11 to 12 million. So much like I said, our expenditures and revenues have been the same for 10 years. Our levy's been relatively same for the last 14 years. It sometimes goes up a couple percent, sometimes goes down a couple percent. If we then go over to the mill rate, because our property valuation has increased over time, you'll see because new businesses come to town, new construction, but also just the valuation of our homes go up too, right? You can see that our levy rate of $9.18, which we think might come in even lower when we set it at the final end of the month, is the lowest you can see in this page of over 30 plus years. Anyone who knows school budgets knows that in the 70s and 80s, levy rates were much higher than they were after revenue limits were implemented in 1993, which happened to be when I started my career. And so by saying that it's a 30 plus year low in what our levy rate has been in this school district, it's actually probably closer to maybe a 50% or 50 year or even longer low in levy rate if you go back in time beyond that. So all in all, we're in a good case where we are projecting a slight deficit. However, we typically are able to cover that by saving some money during the course of the year. So I would anticipate at the end of the year, our levy, our fund balance should be very much close to where it is. We should be able to continue not to have to short-term cash flow borrow. And our levy rate and budgets have been steady for a long time. Now, would we like to see them growing? Do we have additional needs that we would like to address if there was some additional revenue limit dollars? Absolutely. But we are able to manage what the budget parameters that we've been having to live under from the state of Wisconsin. And we do the best we can to keep doing that. And revenue limits do work in the sense of you can see that levy rate is reducing over time. And so that's a good thing as well. And with that, that was all I was going to cover. Again, there's multiple other pages in there for those of you who love numbers and want to take a deep dive. I'm excited about that too, so come see me. I like to talk numbers and budgets, and so it's, if you do, just feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call someday. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Are there any questions for Ron on the budget? Okay. Hearing none, we're going to move on to item 7 on the agenda. We'll be looking to authorize the 2021 through 2022 tax levy. I'll read the sample motion, and then somebody could make it if they would like to. So the sample motion is, be it resolved that a school tax be assessed, advisory only, against all taxable property within the district in the amount of $12,074,341, which is necessary to operate and maintain the district school system and to finance the recommended budget and debt service obligations, General Fund, Fund 10, $8,857,469, non-referendum debt service fund, Fund 38, in the amount of $239,035, referendum debt service fund 39, in the amount of $1,837,837, and the community service fund, Fund 80, in the amount of $1,140,000, if somebody would like to make a motion. What is your name? Thank you, Stacy. I have a motion by Stacy Kavanaugh.
That was for last year.
Okay,
Yeah, if you want to explain
thanks
that.
for the question,
Can you
Barb.
explain that? It's at the back, the resolution?
Yeah, I think what was
Yep.
probably...
Go ahead. Do you want to restate the question first, Ron?
Yeah, so the question was, the numbers sounded different than what the person had heard, and so as Rich read the resolution, there's the grand total levy was the first number, and that's kind of what we talked about, of the $12,074,341, and then that breaks down into the Fund 10 levy, which, if I go back to that page, is put with the general fund. But then the debt service actually gets broken out into two separate numbers. There's a Fund 38, which is non-referendum debt, which we have about 3 years to pay back, and that was when, well, preceding me in this district, so it was about 18 years ago, we took the WRS, which is the retirement system unfunded liability, and we turned it into a real liability, and we've been paying it off at about 2 to 3% versus the 8% that the retirement system was charging us before doing that. And then there's the Fund 39, which is referendum approved debt, and in our case right now, that is simply the North Side project, which will be paid off over the next 3 years. The Parkside project was paid off over 2 years, so that's already been expired. And then the final number, which matches what is in the book, was the levy for the public library. So those are the 4 numbers.
Okay. Any additional questions? Okay, so I have a motion by Stacy Kavanaugh, and I'm looking for a second, and I heard it. Second by Les Bieneman. All those in favor signify by raising your card. All those opposed? Motion carries. Next item in front of the electors is authorizing the Board of Education to furnish textbooks. So here's the sample motion. Be it resolved that the school board of the School District of Monroe, Greene County, Wisconsin shall be and is hereby authorized to furnish free textbooks for use in the school system and to establish a penalty for unusual and unreasonable wear according to rules that may be established by said board, Wisconsin Statute 120.10, paren 15. Would anybody like to make that motion? What is your name? Sorry. Got a motion by Chris Wellington. And a second by Terry Montgomery. All those in favor signify by raising your card. Okay. All those opposed? Motion carries. Next item will be to authorize the Board of Education to operate the hot lunch and milk programs. The sample motion is, be it resolved that the Board of Education, School District of Monroe, Greene County, Wisconsin, is hereby directed to furnish hot lunches and milk to any and all students of said district at such places and times and at such cost as shall be set by said school board, and the school board is hereby authorized to pay any deficiency which may result from said lunch program. Wisconsin Statute 120.10, paren 16. Would entertain a motion. Barb Woodruff. Got a motion by Barb. And a second by Kathy Peters. Any discussion or questions on this motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising your card. All those opposed? Motion carries. Next item is to authorize the Board of Education to provide for the sale of real and personal property not needed for school purposes in accordance with school board policy. Sample motion is, be it resolved that electors of the School District of Monroe, Greene County, Wisconsin, sell any property belonging to and not needed by said district for school purposes. Be it further resolved that the conduct of sale of such property be determined by said Board of Education. Wisconsin Statute 120.10, paren 12. Entertain a motion. Diana Vance. Is there a second? Ellen Hossman. Any questions or discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by raising your card. All those opposed? Motion carries. Next item is to authorize the Board of Education to lease school property. Sample motion is, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the School District of Monroe, Greene County, Wisconsin, be authorized to lease school sites, buildings, and equipment not needed for school purposes to any person for any lawful use at a reasonable rental fee. Wisconsin Statutes 120.13, paren 25, and 120.44, paren 2. Would anybody else? Got a motion by Terry Montgomery.
Steve Rupnow.
Steve Rupnow.
Yep.
Got a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion on this item? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising your card. All those opposed? Motion carries. Next item is to authorize the Board of Education to purchase, operate, and maintain transportation vehicles or to finance contracts for the use of services or transportation vehicles, otherwise known as busing. Sample motion is, be it resolved that the School Board of the School District of Monroe, Greene County, Wisconsin, be authorized to provide transportation service at district expense to pupils based upon the district's transportation policies and hazardous transportation plan. Wisconsin Statute 121.54. Got a motion by David Kavanagh? A second by Luke Johansson.
Yes.
Any discussion or questions on this one? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising your card. All those opposed? Motion carries. Next item is to authorize the Board of Education to direct and provide for the prosecution or defense of any action or proceedings in which the school district is interested. Sample motion is, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the School District of Monroe, Greene County, Wisconsin, is directed to provide for the prosecution or defense of any action or proceeding in which the district is interested for the remainder of the 21 through 22 school year. Wisconsin Statute 120.10, paren 14. Would anybody like to make that motion? Got a motion by Kyle Baker. A second by Barb Woodruff. Any discussion or questions on this item? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising your card. All those opposed? Motion carries. Next item is to authorize the annual salaries of the Board of Education members. This board is a volunteer board, and we have historically had no salaries. So the sample motion would be it resolved by the electors of the School District of Monroe, Greene County, Wisconsin, the following yearly salaries be adopted for the members of the Board of Education under Wisconsin Statute 120.10, paren 3. President, 0. Vice President, 0. Clerk, 0. Treasurer, 0. Deputy Clerk and Directors, 0. I would entertain a motion. Sorry, I couldn't hear you over the rain. Brian Keith, thank you, Brian.
Okay.
Got a motion by Brian Keith. Steve
Bloom
Bloom? Thank you.
or Moon? Oh, there.
Moon.
I said Bloom.
Okay, so we have a motion by Brian Keith and a second by Steve Moon. Any discussion or questions on this item? The question is, how many school boards in the state of Wisconsin are volunteer boards or are unpaid?
Yeah, at the last time we looked, there's about 10 school boards in Wisconsin that are unpaid out of about 425 school districts.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. So all those in favor signify by raising your card. All those opposed? Motion carries. The next item is to authorize the expense reimbursement for the Board of Education members. Sample motion is, be it resolved by the electors of the School District of Monroe, Greene County, Wisconsin, that the board members be reimbursed for their actual and necessary expenses up to the limits defined by board policy when traveling outside the district to perform school board duties in accordance with state statutes. Wisconsin Statute 120.10, paren 4. Sorry, say your name again? Kim Carey. Motion by Kim Carey, and my second was? Barb Woodruff. Any discussion or questions on this item? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising your card. All those opposed? Motion carries. Our next item is to establish the date and time for the 2022 annual meeting. Sample motion is, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the School District of Monroe, Greene County, Wisconsin, be authorized to set the date for the 2022 annual meeting and budget hearing. Would anybody like to make that motion? Was Karen
Bowl.
Bowl. Got a motion by Karen Bowl. Second by Mary Sadi.
So if the board would like to set that date now, the corresponding date to this year would be Monday, October 10th of 2022 at 7 p.m. if you want to stay with the same format of the board meeting following the annual meeting. So that could be set, since this is the annual meeting, the board would set that separately in a board meeting. by making a motion.
Yep, I believe that's the motion on the floor and seconded to empower the board to set that date.
So that is likely the date we would be looking at.
Okay. Okay, any questions or discussion on this item? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising your card. All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, and before we entertain this final motion to adjourn, I just want to again express heartfelt thanks and gratitude for all the people in attendance tonight to take part in this process. We appreciate you all taking time out of your evening and being here with us.
And we have a board meeting at 8 o'clock if anyone's, interested.
Yeah. So at 7:42, I'd entertain a final motion to adjourn if somebody would like to make one. I've got a motion by Steve Rupnow. And a second by Catherine
Boughton.
Boughton. All those in favor signify by raising your card. All those opposed? The annual meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
And the board meeting as posted will be starting at 8 p.m. because that is